The signal came in exactly the way tragedy always does at the Galactic Naval Academy on Ceres Prime. Wrapped in the mundane, buried between a maintenance advisory and a cafeteria menu update, flagged with the lowest possible priority marker the archives could assign. Cadet Lieutenant Marta Vane found it by accident. She was 19 standard years old, 3 months from her final commissioning, and she had drawn the least glamorous duty in the entire academy, overnight monitor of the peripheral incident feed. Every navy in the galaxy fed raw sensor telemetry into a shared repository, and someone somewhere had to sit and watch it scroll. Most cadets slept through the shift. Marta did not sleep. She had never been good at sleeping, and she had learned long ago that the hours other people wasted were the hours a person could use to get ahead. So she was awake, and alert, and watching, when the log for a small human hauler convoy designated Meridian 9 went dark. It did not go dark the way a convoy went dark when it dropped into a jump lane. Marta had watched 1,000 of those. The telemetry faded gracefully, handed off to a relay, resumed on the far side. This was different. Meridian 9's 9 transponders had been broadcasting steady, boring, cargo manifest and heartbeat pulses one moment. In the next moment there were 7, then 4, then 1, and that one screaming. She sat up. The peripheral incident feed was not built for urgency. It rendered the event as a small amber dot in a corner of a system called Threshold Reach, a nothing junction on the edge of the Concord's mapped space, a place ships passed through and never stopped. The automated classifier had already assigned the incident a severity rating. Marta read it twice to be sure she understood. Severity minor, classification commercial loss event, recommended action log and archive. The last transponder cut out while she was still reading, not a graceful fade, a cut. Something had reached into that convoy and closed its hand. Marta pulled the raw feed apart with the reflexes the Academy had spent 2 years drilling into her. She stripped the classifier's summary away and looked at what the sensors had actually recorded in the final 90 seconds. Weapons discharge signatures, plasma lance, the specific harmonic of a Rakesh Raider coil. 9 cargo haulers, unarmed, carrying, according to the manifest, medical polymer feedstock and 41 human crew. And around them, converging out of the dark, at least 6 Raider hulls running silent until the moment they were not. It was not a malfunction. It was not a navigational error. It was a slaughter, executed with the patience of people who had done it before and expected no consequences. She flagged it up the chain. That was the protocol. A cadet did not decide the severity of an incident. A cadet escalated and let an officer decide. So she pushed the event to the duty officer's queue with her own note appended: reclassify, coordinated attack, 6+ hostiles, 41 lives. Not a commercial loss. The response came back in 11 minutes, which told her the duty officer had barely looked. Acknowledged, cadet. Threshold Reach is outside Concord patrol jurisdiction. Human commercial traffic in ungoverned space assumes its own risk. Incident will be logged per classifier recommendation. Return to monitoring. Marta read it 3 times. Then she sat very still in the dim light of the monitoring room. 41 names she did not have scrolling behind her eyes, and she felt something she had been taught, gently and persistently, to suppress. The specific, cold clarity of being told that a thing that mattered did not matter. She was human. There were not many humans at the Galactic Naval Academy. Humanity had been a Concord member for only 40 years, a blink, a probationary species still earning its seat, and the Academy took human cadets in small, careful numbers and watched them carefully and expected them, above all, to be reasonable. Marta had been reasonable for 2 years. She had been reasonable when instructors mispronounced her name. She had been reasonable when a Velthi tactics professor explained to the class that human military doctrine was quaint, sentimental, and unscalable. She had been reasonable through 10,000 small dismissals, because the alternative was to prove every prejudice right, and she had wanted the seat more than she had wanted to be angry. She was not going to be reasonable about 41 people. But she was also 19, and a cadet, and she understood the machine she was inside of well enough to know that anger alone moved nothing. So she did the only thing she could do. She wrote a full incident reconstruction, the kind a third year was not required to produce, and she attached every scrap of raw telemetry, and she filed it not to the duty officer, but to the one address she had memorized the way some people memorized prayers, the office of the human Concord naval liaison. Then she went back to monitoring, because those were her orders, and she watched the amber dot in threshold reach fade from the display as the system, having logged and archived a minor commercial loss event, moved on. The galaxy in the days that followed did not notice. This was not cruelty exactly. It was arithmetic. The Concord spanned 19,000 inhabited systems and 140 member species, and things died in it constantly. Ships were lost. Colonies failed. Raider clans took what the patrol lanes did not protect, and the patrol lanes could not protect everything, and so a settled ancient consensus had formed over 10,000 years of galactic civilization. Some losses were simply the cost of a galaxy too large to hold in one hand. You mourned them if they were yours. You logged them if they were not. And a human convoy in ungoverned space, run by a species barely out of its probation, was very much not anyone's. The Rakash certainly understood this. They had understood it for a long time. They were not the galaxy's great villains. That was the thing people would later find hardest to explain. The Rakash-reaving clans were a nuisance, a persistent low-grade infection at the edges of civilized space, tolerated because eradicating them was more expensive than enduring them. They struck soft targets, took cargo and sometimes captives, and vanished into the ungoverned dark before any patrol could respond. They had a code of sorts. They did not strike hard targets. They did not provoke the great powers. They read the galaxy's tolerances the way a tick reads the warmth of skin, and for 1,000 years they had fed at exactly the level that kept anyone from bothering to remove them. Meridian 9 had been to them a routine feeding, 9 soft hulls, 41 soft crew. A manifest worth taking, and a species with no navy anyone respected, and no allies who would spend a warship on the matter. The clan leader who ordered it, a raid mother named Susketh of the Broken Tyne, had run the calculation the way her mothers had taught her. She had judged the humans a safe meal. She was not stupid, she had checked. Humanity had a navy, yes, a young one, small by galactic standards, built in the 40 years since first contact. But it was a defensive force, everyone knew, clustered around Earth and its dozen colonies, unblooded, untested, more symbol than sword. It had never fought a real war. It had never projected force beyond its own borders. The Concord's own assessment, freely available, rated the human defense fleet as regionally competent, strategically negligible. Susketh had read that assessment. She had believed it. Almost everyone did. The only people who did not believe it were the humans. Fleet Admiral Idris Okonkwo received Marta Vane's incident reconstruction at 04:12 station time, forwarded by the Naval Liaison's office with a single line. You will want to see this one. He was in his office aboard the flagship Resolute, in orbit over a world 4 jumps from Earth, and he was not a man given to drama. He had spent 30 years building the human defense fleet from a collection of refitted colony ships into something the humans, privately, among themselves, did not call defensive at all. He had done it patiently, in the spaces the galaxy was not watching, because the galaxy's inattention was the single greatest strategic asset humanity possessed, and he had guarded it like a miser guards gold. He read the cadet's reconstruction. He read it twice. It was good work, better than good, the work of someone who had refused to accept a lie simply because the system had told her to. He noted the name. Then he read the telemetry and the Rakash coil signature and the 6 converging hulls and the manifest with its 41 names, and the Concord classifier's verdict stamped across all of it: minor. Convoy sat for a long time, with the report open in front of him. He was not sentimental about death. 30 years in uniform had cured him of that. But he understood something about it that the galaxy, in its vast patient arithmetic, had forgotten. He understood that when a predator learns it can feed on you without consequence, it does not stop. It teaches its young. The feeding becomes a season, and the season becomes a tradition, and in a generation the 41 dead become 4,000, and by then the predator has grown too comfortable, too certain, too woven into the fabric of what is tolerated, to ever be dislodged without a war. The galaxy called that tolerance. Convoy called it a debt collecting interest. Humanity had been paying interest on that debt for 40 years. Small hulls picked off in the ungoverned dark, colonists taken and never recovered. Each incident too minor to answer, each answer too provocative for a probationary species to risk. And so the humans had swallowed it, and the Rakash had learned exactly what the assessment said: that humanity was safe to eat. He had spent those same 40 years building the thing that would prove the assessment wrong. Not a bigger navy, a different one. The galaxy built navies the way it built everything, in the image of its own vast slow patience. Enormous individual warships, city-sized dreadnoughts crewed by thousands, each one a sovereign fortress, deployed sparingly because each one was irreplaceable. It was an old logic, and it worked, and it had kept the peace for 10,000 years. And it had one flaw that no one in the Concord had thought about in a very long time, because no one had needed to. It could not concentrate. A galaxy of irreplaceable fortresses could not afford to lose them, and so it never committed them. And so its power, though immense, was always diffuse, always hedged, always held back. Humanity had built the opposite. Convoy's fleet was not made of fortresses. It was made of a doctrine, drilled into every crew until it lived below thought, that a warship was not precious, that a fleet was not a collection of ships but a single instrument, and that the entire instrument could be brought to bear, all of it at once, on a single point, faster than anyone in the galaxy believed was possible. The Concord had never seen a navy that could concentrate its full strength in one place in a matter of days. It had never occurred to the Concord that anyone would want to. The whole galactic order rested on the quiet assumption that no one ever would. Convoy closed the report. He keyed his aide. "Get me the naval board," he said, "and find out where Cadet Marta Vane is stationed. I want her seconded to fleet operations before the week is out. Someone who refuses to call a slaughter minor is someone I want in the room." "Sir," the aide said, "the board will ask what you intend." Convoy looked out the viewport at the slow curve of a human world, and past it, at the dark, where a raid mother named Susketh was already dividing the spoils of Meridian 9 among her clan and calculating her next safe meal. "Tell them," he said, "that we are going to answer a minor incident, in full." Marta was pulled from monitoring duty 6 days later. She assumed she was being disciplined. It was the only explanation that fit. Cadets did not file reconstructions over the heads of duty officers. Cadets did not escalate reclassifications the officer corps had already denied. She had spent 6 days waiting for the reprimand, rehearsing the reasonable, measured defense she would give. And when the summons came, routing her not to the academy commandant but to a shuttle pad with a fleet transport waiting, she understood only that the reprimand was going to be worse than she had feared. The transport took her up out of Ceres Prime's atmosphere, and it did not turn toward any station she recognized. It turned toward open space, toward a jump lane, and Marta pressed her face to the viewport and watched the academy shrink and thought, with the particular dread of the young and disciplined, that she had thrown away everything she had worked for over 41 people whose names she would never know. She was wrong about that, but it would be some time before she understood how wrong. The transport did not take Marta to a station, it took her to a fleet. She had seen the human defense fleet before. in the way that everyone had seen it. Parade formations over Earth on Founding Day, a few dozen ships arranged in clean rows for the cameras, impressive to a civilian and quaint to anyone who had studied the great Concord dreadnoughts. That was the fleet the galaxy knew. That was the fleet the assessment rated as strategically negligible. What the transport carried her toward was not that fleet. They emerged from the jump lane into a system that did not appear on any civilian chart, a dim red dwarf with a single scarred moon, and the space around that moon was full of ships. Marta stopped counting at 200. They were not dreadnoughts. Not one of them was city-sized. They were lean, dark, purposeful hulls, most of them smaller than a Concord cruiser, arranged not in parade rows but in the tight-nested spheres of a formation she recognized from her tactics coursework. A formation her Velthi professor had called quaint and unscalable, a formation for concentrating fire. There were hundreds of them. There were more arriving while she watched, sliding in from jump lanes in disciplined streams, folding into the formation without a wasted motion, each one taking its place in a pattern too large for any single ship to see, and yet executed as if every crew could see the whole. "That's not possible," Marta said aloud to no one. The galaxy's navies could not do this. She knew the doctrine cold. Conquered warships were sovereign fortresses. They deployed alone or in pairs. A squadron of 6 was considered a major fleet action. To assemble hundreds of hulls in one system, moving as one instrument, required a kind of coordination the great powers had never bothered to develop because their whole model was built on the irreplaceable individual ship. She was looking at something the galaxy believed did not exist. She was looking at it out a transport viewport, and it was human, and no one had told her. An officer met her at the flagship's dock. He was young, not much older than she was, with the fleet insignia of a lieutenant commander, and he did not look at her the way academy officers looked at cadets. "Cadet Vane, Commander Reyes. The Admiral wants you." He turned and walked, and she scrambled to follow. "You filed the Meridian 9 reconstruction." "I did, sir. Am I?" "You're not in trouble." He said it without slowing. "You're the reason we found out fast enough to do anything. Duty officer would have buried it. You dug it out and threw it at the one office that would move. The Admiral noticed. That's why you're here." "Here," Marta said, "is where exactly?" Reyes stopped at a bulkhead door, the staging point for a full fleet action, first one in human history. He looked at her, and there was something in his face that was not quite a smile, the look of someone about to show a person a thing they would spend the rest of their life having seen. "The galaxy thinks we have a Coast Guard, Cadet. In about a week, it's going to find out otherwise. And you get to watch from the room where it happens, because a 19-year-old refused to let 41 people be called minor." The door opened. Marta went through it and into the war. The room was a fleet operations center, and it was full of people who did not stop working when she entered. Holographic displays hung in the air, rendering threshold reach and the ungoverned space around it in cold blue light, and threaded through all of it were the tracks of Rakash raider movements, months of them, patiently reconstructed. Marta understood at a glance what she was seeing. Someone had taken every logged raider incident in this region for the last 2 years, the ones the galaxy had filed as minor and forgotten, and stitched them into a map. The map showed a pattern. It showed the Broken Time clans' hunting grounds, their staging asteroids, their fuel caches, their routes. It showed a predator's whole territory laid bare. Admiral Okonkwo stood at the center of it. Marta had never met him. She knew him the way everyone knew him, the man who had built the parade fleet, and she had never imagined him standing in front of a war map that revealed the parade fleet to be a lie of omission. "Cadet Vane," he said without turning. "You called it a coordinated attack, 6+ hostiles, 41 lives. You were right on every count. The classifier called it a commercial loss. The Concord agreed. Do you know why?" Marta chose honesty. "Because we don't matter to them yet, sir." No, Okonkwo turned. He was not a large man, but he filled the room. Because it costs them nothing to be wrong. That is the whole of galactic strategy, Cadet, 10,000 years of it, and no one has looked at it closely in a very long time. The Concord is vast and its power is real, but its power is scattered across 19,000 systems in fortress ships too precious to risk. It cannot concentrate. It has never needed to concentrate. And so it has forgotten that concentration is the oldest form of overwhelming force there is. He gestured at the map. The Rakash have fed on us for 40 years because they read the galaxy's tolerances perfectly. They are correct that no one will spend a fortress on 41 humans. They have made exactly one error. What error, sir? They assumed we fight like the galaxy. Okonkwo's voice did not rise. It did not need to. We don't. We never have. The galaxy builds a few irreplaceable ships and hoards them. We build many and we spend them together all at once on one point faster than anyone believes is possible. The galaxy has never seen a navy concentrate its entire strength in a single action because the galaxy's navies cannot. Ours can. In 6 days, every operational hull in the human defense fleet will be at that staging moon. And then we are going to take the whole of it into threshold reach and remove the Broken Tine clan from the galaxy. The room was silent. Marta found her voice. The whole fleet, sir, for a raider clan. For the debt, Okonkwo said. Understand me, Cadet. This is not revenge. Revenge would be to find the 6 hulls that killed Meridian 9 and destroy them, and the galaxy would file that as a minor reprisal and forget it, and the Rakash would call it a bad hunt and feed somewhere else. That changes nothing. What we are going to do is different. We are going to bring a force so overwhelming, so precise, so total, that no one who witnesses it, not the Rakash, not the Concord, not any species in 19,000 systems, will ever again make the mistake of calling a human loss minor. We are going to answer one dismissed attack with the entire Navy the galaxy swears we do not have. And we are going to do it so cleanly that the message is unmistakable. What message, sir? Marta asked, though she was beginning to understand. That when you feed on us, Okonkwo said, you are not eating a soft meal in the dark where no one is watching. You are pulling on a thread that runs all the way back to a navy that can put its whole self on your doorstep in 6 days. Every predator in this galaxy has built its entire way of life on the belief that we are safe to eat. We are going to correct that belief. Once. Completely. In front of everyone. For the next 6 days, Marta learned what human warfare actually was, and it was nothing like the doctrine her Velthi professor had mocked. She had expected fury. She found accounting. The operations center did not run on rage. It ran on lists, checklists, timing tables, fuel logistics, jump plane deconfliction schedules that resolved the movement of 300 ships to the minute. Every hull that arrived was slotted into a formation and a firing plan and a contingency tree, and the crews drilled endlessly, the same maneuvers over and over until they could execute them in the dark, in silence, with their sensors down. Marta watched a squadron of 40 ships perform a concentration maneuver, folding their fire onto a simulated target from 40 different vectors, so that it arrived in the same instant, and then watched them do it again, and again, and again, until the timing variance across 40 independent crews was measured in fractions of a second. They're not faster than the galaxy, she said to Commander Reyes on the 3rd day, watching. The individual ships aren't faster, the crews aren't smarter, it's the discipline. They can do the same simple thing together perfectly 10,000 times without a single one breaking rhythm. Now you understand human doctrine, Reyes said. The galaxy builds genius into its ships. We build discipline into our fleets. A genius fortress is unbeatable alone and useless in a crowd. 300 disciplined hulls that never break formation are something the galaxy has no answer for because it has never had to imagine one. He watched the squadron reset for another run. The Rakash think endurance is a weakness. They hit soft and vanish because they can't stand a long fight. They've never met a force whose entire nature is that it does not tire, does not scatter, does not stop. We are going to be the thing that does not stop. That's the whole plan, cadet. Be relentless together, and let that be its own crushing weight. Marta was given work. Convoy, it turned out, had not brought her to watch. He had brought her because she had seen the pattern in the Meridian 9 data when a trained officer had not, and he put that eye to use. Her job was the Raider network map, to take every scrap of intelligence, every logged incident, every intercepted clan transmission, and refine the picture of where the Broken Time clan lived, staged, and hid. It was tedious, exacting, unglamorous work, and Marta was extraordinarily good at it, because she did not sleep and she did not tire and she refused to accept an uncertainty she could resolve. By the 5th day, she had found something no one else had. She brought it to Convoy directly because Rays told her to. The Broken Time don't scatter after a raid, sir. Everyone assumes Raider clans disperse. This one doesn't. They regroup. There's a staging point, a captured asteroid station in an uncharted rock field 2 jumps from Threshold Reach. Every raid track in the last 2 years terminates there or originates there. It's their home. If we hit the raiders in Threshold Reach, we destroy the hunting party. If we hit the station, we destroy the clan. Convoy studied her map for a long time. The station has the captives, he said quietly. Any humans the Rakesh have taken alive in 40 years and not sold, they'll be there. Marta had not let herself think about that. She made herself think about it now. Then we can't just destroy it, sir. No, Convoy said, we cannot. He looked at her, and something in his assessment of her shifted permanently. You just turned a punitive strike into a rescue, cadet. Do you understand what that costs? A rescue is 100 times harder than a bombardment. We have to take the station intact. We have to fight through it room by room with the clan defending its own home, and we have to do it fast enough that they can't kill the captives out of spite. You just made this operation immeasurably more difficult. He turned back to the map. And immeasurably more worth doing. Redraw the plan. The station is the objective. The hunting party in Threshold Reach is now a secondary target we take on the way in. Marta stood there, 19 years old, having just rewritten the first full fleet action in human history, and felt the weight of it settle onto her shoulders, and did not flinch. Yes, sir, she said. On the far side of the ungoverned dark, Suskith of the Broken Time was planning her next hunt. Meridian 9 had gone well. The medical polymer had sold at a premium. The human crew had brought a fair price on the labor markets that did not ask where labor came from, and the galaxy had reacted exactly as it always did, which was not at all. She had checked the incident logs herself. Minor. Logged and archived. It was the sweetest phrase in any language she knew. It meant her mothers had been right, and their mothers before them. The humans were a renewable resource, a soft species with a toy navy, and the great powers of the galaxy would no more spend a warship defending them than a person would spend a fortune defending an anthill. She had 110 warriors and 30 hulls at the Broken Time station, and 40 years of taken humans laboring in its lower decks, and a reputation among the reaving clans as a raid mother who read the galaxy's tolerances better than anyone alive. She had never lost a hull to reprisal. She never would. The whole art of her trade was to feed at exactly the level that no one would answer, and she was a master of it. She did not know that 2 jumps away, a fleet the galaxy swore did not exist had finished assembling around a scarred red moon. She did not know that a 19-year-old human had found her home. She was, in every way that mattered, a woman who had spent her whole life reading the galaxy correctly, and who was about to discover that the galaxy had changed, and no one had told her, because the ones who could have told her were already on their way. The fleet moved on the 7th day. Marta stood in the operations center of the flagship Resolute and watched it happen, and for the rest of her life she would struggle to make anyone who had not seen it understand what it looked like. 311 hulls, the entire operational strength of the human defense fleet, did not lumber out of the staging system in a slow procession the way a Concord battle group would have. They left all at once. In a single coordinated jump, executed to a timing table Marta had helped compile, 311 ships folded into the jump lane in the same 9-second window and were gone, and the space around the scarred red moon, which had held a navy a moment before, was empty. "That's the part they'll never believe," Ray said beside her. "Not the numbers, the synchronization. The Concord takes days to move a battle group because every fortress captain is a sovereign and jumps when he's ready. We move as one because we drilled it 10,000 times. Watch. When we come out the other side, we'll be in formation before they've cleared their own sensor wash." They came out the other side in formation. The first jump took them to a marshalling point in the ungoverned dark, one lane from threshold reach, and Marta watched 311 ships resolve out of the jump haze already nested in their firing spheres, already oriented, already moving. There was no milling about, no reforming, no confusion. The instrument had folded itself up, traveled, and unfolded, and it was the same instrument on the far side. She understood, watching it, why Convoy had spent 30 years on this and told the galaxy nothing. It was not a fleet. It was a single weapon that happened to be made of 300 pieces, and every piece knew, at every instant, exactly where every other piece was and what it was about to do. "Threshold reach first," Convoy said to the room. "The hunting party is there." Sensor reconstruction puts 8 Rakash hulls staging for another raid. We do not chase them. We do not let them scatter into the dark to warn the station. We concentrate, we envelop, and we end it before they understand what has arrived. Second Squadron, you have the jump plane exits. Nothing leaves threshold reach. Nothing. Marta watched the plan she had helped draw begin to execute, and she learned what human concentration meant when it was aimed at a living enemy. The fleet entered threshold reach not as a wave, but as a closing hand. The Rakash hunting party, 8 raider hulls loitering near the ambush point where they had killed Meridian 9, detected the human fleet's arrival, and did exactly what raiders did. They broke for the jump lanes, trusting speed and the dark, the tactic that had kept them alive for 1,000 years. It had always worked. It had always worked because no enemy had ever been fast enough or numerous enough or disciplined enough to close every exit at once. The human second squadron was already at every exit. It had jumped ahead, deployed to the lane mouths, and gone silent, and when the raiders broke for the dark they ran into a wall of ships that had been waiting for them before they knew they were being hunted. And then the closing hand closed. Marta watched the firing solution resolve on the display. 140 human hulls folding their fire onto 8 raiders from 140 vectors, and the fire arrived in the same instant, the concentration maneuver she had watched them drill, until the timing variance was fractions of a second, aimed now at living ships. It was over in 90 seconds. It was over in the same span of time that it had taken to kill Meridian 9, and Marta understood that Convoy had chosen that symmetry deliberately, and that the raid mother 2 jumps away would understand it too when she saw the sensor logs. 8 Rakash hulls, 0 human losses. Not a single ship of the fleet so much as scratched, because the enemy had never been allowed to fight. It had been enveloped and ended before it could bring a single weapon to bear. This was the human way of war that the galaxy had never seen. Not a duel between fortresses, but the total, disciplined, overwhelming application of a whole navy to a target that could not survive it, and was never given the chance to try. "Log it," Convoy said quietly. "Full telemetry, unencrypted. I want the Concord classifier to receive this in real time. Let them try to file it as minor." They did not linger in threshold reach. The fleet swept it clean, recovered what could be recovered of Meridian 9, 41 names given at least the dignity of a record, and then it folded itself up and jumped again, Toward the uncharted rock field 2 jumps out, toward the broken Tyne station, toward the captives, toward the raid mother who did not yet know her hunting party was gone. Susketh learned it the way Marta had learned about Meridian 9, through a signal that arrived wrapped in the mundane. A courier hull, one of the 8 raiders, had not run for a jump lane. Its captain had done something no Rakash raider had done in living memory. He had seen the human fleet closing and understood in the space of a heartbeat that this was not a reprisal, that this was extinction. And instead of fighting or fleeing, he had transmitted everything. A raw sensor dump of 300 human hulls moving as one, and then powered down and drifted, playing dead, and survived. He had run for home on emergency thrust the moment the fleet jumped out, and he reached the broken Tyne station 6 hours ahead of it, and he told Susketh what was coming. She did not believe him. 300 hulls, she said, for a hunting party, for a cargo raid. You are describing a war fleet spent on an anthill. No power in the galaxy would do this. The humans do not have 300 hulls. I have the telemetry, the courier said. Raid mother, I watched them. They moved together, all of them, in one jump. I have never seen ships move like that. The Concord cannot move like that. They enveloped 8 of us in 90 seconds and lost nothing. They are not a war fleet. They are one weapon, and it is coming here, and it knows where we are. Susketh looked at the telemetry. She was a master of reading the galaxy's tolerances, and she had built her whole life on a single correct assessment, that the humans were safe to eat. She looked at 311 hulls moving as one instrument, and she felt the assessment die, and with it, 40 years of certainty. Why, she said slowly, would they spend this on us, for 41? The galaxy filed it as minor. Even the humans' own Concord filed it as minor. I don't think it's about the 41, the courier said. I think it's about everyone who comes after. I think they're not answering us. I think they're answering the galaxy, and we are the answer. Susketh of the broken Tyne, who had never lost a hull to reprisal, who had read the galaxy correctly her whole life, looked at the death coming for her home, and made the only decision her doctrine allowed. She could not fight 300 hulls. She could not flee fast enough to matter. So she reached for the one lever a raider always kept, the lever that had ended 100 pursuits before they began. The captives, she said, bring them up, all of them, every human we hold. If the humans want them alive, then the humans will negotiate, and if they will not negotiate, then they will watch what their fleet costs. She bared her teeth. They spent a navy on 41 dead. Let us see what they will pay for 400 living. The intercept reached the Resolute an hour before the fleet emerged into the rock field. Rakash clanband chatter decrypted in real time by the human signals section, and it turned Marta's blood to ice. She brought it to Okonkwo herself. Sir, they know we're coming. A courier survived threshold reach and warned them. And there, she made herself say it, they're moving the captives to the station's outer decks. As shields, as hostages. 411 humans, sir, 40 years of the taken. She's going to use them. The operations center went quiet. This was the thing every commander feared, the thing that turned a clean, overwhelming action into an impossible one. You could not bombard a station full of your own people. You could not envelop and end it in 90 seconds. You had to go in and go slow and fight for every deck, and the enemy knew it and had planned for it, and would spend the captives one at a time to make the price unbearable. Marta watched Okonkwo absorb it. She waited for the calculation she had been taught the galaxy always made, the arithmetic of acceptable loss, the moment where 411 captives became minor. It did not come. Then we do it the hard way, Okonkwo said. Redraw the assault. Marta Cadet Vane, you know the station's layout better than anyone in this fleet. You built the intelligence picture. I need you to find me the fast paths. Where are the captives held? Where will they move them? And how do we reach them faster than the Rakash can hurt them? He turned to the room. We are not going to trade lives with a raider. We are not going to negotiate with someone who takes people to use as a shield, because the moment we negotiate, every clan in the galaxy learns that taking humans buys leverage, and we will have made things infinitely worse. We are going to take that station so fast and so completely that the Rakash never get the chance to spend a single captive. Speed is the whole plan now. Speed and discipline. We do not stop. We do not slow. We do not tire. We go through them like water through a broken dam, and we reach our people before the enemy can lift a hand against them. Sir, a tactical officer said, against a defended station, room by room, with 100+ warriors dug in, the casualty projections. I know the projections, Convoy said. Draw them anyway, and then draw me the plan that beats them. We did not come 2 jumps into the dark to lose our people at the last deck. Cadet Vane, the fast paths, now. Marta was already at the map. She threw the station's layout into the air. Every corridor and deck and access shaft she had reconstructed over 5 sleepless days, and she began to trace, and the whole operations center gathered around a 19-year-old cadet as she found the arteries of the enemy's home. She had lived inside this map for a week. She knew it better than the Rakash who had lived in it for a decade, because she had studied it the way only a person who does not sleep and does not accept uncertainty can study a thing. Here, she said, and her voice did not shake, because she had stopped being afraid somewhere back in threshold reach and started being something colder and steadier and more useful. The captive decks are here in the core behind 3 security bulkheads. If they move them outward to use as shields, they have exactly 2 routes, because the other corridors are too narrow for a mass of prisoners under guard. Both routes pass through this junction. If we take this junction in the first 3 minutes of the assault, before they've finished moving the captives, we cut the shields off from the shielded. The prisoners stay in the core, where we can reach them, and the warriors are left holding empty corridors. Convoy looked at the junction, 3 minutes, into a defended station. 3 minutes, Marta said. It's possible, I'll show you how, but it means the boarding parties can't fight their way in carefully. They have to hit the junction like the fleet hit threshold reach, all at once, everywhere, faster than the enemy can react. It means we don't fight the station. We overwhelm it before it knows the fight has started. She looked up at the admiral, this man who had built a secret navy for 30 years, and she said the thing that had been forming in her since the transport first showed her the fleet. Sir, it's the same maneuver. It's concentration. We've just never aimed it at the inside of a building before. Convoy held her gaze for a long moment. No, he said, we haven't. He turned to the room and his voice filled it. You heard the cadet. Rewrite the boarding plan around that junction. Every boarding party, every marine, every breach, timed to a single window. We take the junction in 3 minutes. We cut the captives free of the shields, and then we take the rest of the station 1 deck at a time, and we do not stop until every human aboard is standing on the right side of a human airlock. Move. The fleet folded itself up and jumped, and Marta Vane, 19 years old, watched the plan she had drawn carry 311 ships and 4,000 Marines toward the home of the people who had called her species safe to eat. The fleet came out of jump into the rock field and did not slow down. Marta had expected the broken time station to be hidden, cautious, dark. Instead it blazed. Suskith had lit every defensive system she had. 30 hulls arrayed in a defensive shell around the captured asteroid, weapons batteries powered and tracking. The whole clan braced for a fight it believed it could survive because it held 411 human lives in its core. The Raid Mother had made her calculation. She thought the humans would hesitate. She thought the hostages bought her time to bleed the fleet, to make the price of the station so high that the humans would stop, would talk, would leave. She had never seen a human fleet fight. She did not understand that it would not hesitate, and that it would not slow, and that the very thing she thought was her shield was the thing the fleet had planned its entire assault around. The human fleet arrived already in its assault configuration, and it did not form up, and it did not probe the defenses, and it did not open a negotiation channel. It concentrated. Marta watched the firing solution resolve, the one she had helped time to the fraction of a second, and the outer shell of 30 Rakash hulls, the Raid Mother's defensive fleet, was enveloped from 300 vectors and folded in on itself in the space of 2 minutes. Not destroyed carelessly, not with fire that could stray toward the asteroid and the captives inside it, but with the surgical, disciplined concentration of a navy that had drilled this exact maneuver 10,000 times, until it could place its fire exactly where it chose and nowhere else. The defensive shell that Susketh believed would bleed the humans for hours ceased to exist before she had finished issuing her first order. And in the same 2 minutes, under the cover of that concentration, the boarding parties launched. 4,000 Marines in 160 assault craft, timed to a single window, aimed not at the station's defended faces, but at the breach points Marta had found in the map, the access shafts and maintenance locks and structural seams that a raider clan had never imagined an enemy would know about. They hit the station everywhere at once. There was no beachhead to defend, no single point of entry the Rakash could concentrate against, because the humans did to the station exactly what they had done to the hunting party in Threshold Reach. They arrived at every point simultaneously, faster than the defense could orient, and by the time the clan understood it was being boarded, the boarders were already inside and moving toward the junction. The junction. Marta stood in the operations center and watched the marine channel, and she stopped breathing. Susketh had begun moving the captives the moment the fleet emerged. 411 humans herded up out of the core toward the outer decks, toward the positions where their bodies would become the Raid Mother's shield. And the 2 routes they had to travel both passed through the junction Marta had marked, and the human boarding parties were racing toward that same junction. And the entire operation, the whole answer to a dismissed attack, the whole message to a galaxy that called human lives minor, came down to a race through a corridor between Marines who did not tire and guards herding prisoners they intended to spend. The Marines reached the junction in 2 minutes and 50 seconds. They reached it because they did not stop. Marta listened to the channel and understood, finally and completely, what her instructors had meant when they said human doctrine was built on endurance, and what her Velthi professor had meant when he called it quaint, and how wrong he had been. The Rakash warriors in those corridors were faster than humans, individually stronger, better suited to the close dark of a boarding fight. They fought the way raiders fought, in sharp, violent bursts, and they expected the humans to fight the same way, to surge and recoil, to test and probe and pull back to regroup. The humans did not recoil, they did not pull back. They came on at a steady, relentless, disciplined pace that never accelerated into recklessness and never slowed into caution. A wall of armored Marines advancing through fire as if the fire were weather, closing every gap the instant it opened, replacing every Marine who fell without breaking stride, and it did not stop, and it did not tire, and the Rakash, who had built their whole way of war on the short violent burst, found themselves fighting a thing that simply would not end. The raiders' ferocity broke against the humans' endurance the way a wave breaks against a seawall, spending itself in fury while the wall does not move, and cannot be moved, and is still there when the wave has nothing left. At 2 minutes and 50 seconds, the lead Marine element reached the junction and took it, and the 411 captives on their way to becoming shields were cut off from the outer decks, still in the core, still where the humans could reach them. Susketh's shield was gone before she could raise it. The Raid Mother understood then that she had lost. She had one lever left, the oldest and ugliest one, and she reached for it. If she could not use the captives as shields, she could use them as a message. She could kill them, all of them, and make the humans' victory taste of ash, and teach the galaxy that answering a raider clan cost more than it saved. She gave the order. Her mothers would have given the same order. It was the last card in the deck of a predator, that has run out of tolerances to read. She had assumed she would have time. She did not have time, because the humans had planned the entire assault around exactly this moment, around the fear that a cornered raider would spend the captives out of spite, and they had built their whole timing table to reach the core faster than that order could be carried out. The instant the junction fell, the Marine reserve poured through it toward the captive decks, not fighting their way in but flooding in, a mass of armored humans moving at the relentless pace that did not stop, and they reached the 3 security bulkheads Marta had mapped, and they breached them not one at a time but all at once, and they were inside the captive decks, while Susketh's guards were still receiving the order to kill. Marta listened to the Marine channel and heard it happen. She heard the breach. She heard the guards in the captive decks, caught between an order to murder 400 people and an enemy already through the door, choose the fight in front of them because the fight in front of them would not let them do anything else. The humans gave them no window. There was no pause in which a guard could turn from the fight to the prisoners, because the human advance did not pause, ever, and every second the guards spent alive was a second they spent fighting for their own lives against a wall of Marines that did not tire and did not stop, and did not give them one free moment to commit an atrocity. The captive decks were taken in 4 minutes. 411 humans, some of them taken 40 years ago, some of them born in captivity who had never seen a human ship, were alive when the Marines reached them, because the Marines had reached them before the order to kill could outrun the assault. Marta Vane, 19 years old, sat down slowly in the operations center of the Resolute and put her hands over her face, and no one in that room thought less of her for it, because most of them were doing the same. Susketh of the Broken Tyne was taken alive. That too was a decision, and Okonkwo had made it deliberately, and Marta understood why the moment she heard it. A dead raid mother was a martyr, a story the clans could tell each other about the humans who had spent a navy on a grudge. A living raid mother, taken in her own home, her clan ended, her shield stripped away, her captives freed, was something else entirely. She was a witness. She was the one who would carry the answer back to the galaxy, not as a rumor but as testimony. The raid mother who had read the galaxy correctly her whole life and had been correct about everything except the humans. The Marines brought her to the Resolute, and Okonkwo saw her, and he brought Marta into the room because Marta had found her, and Okonkwo believed a person should see the end of the thing they had begun. Susketh looked at the Admiral, and then, longer, at the young human cadet standing beside him, and she asked the question that the whole galaxy would soon be asking. 41, she said in the trade tongue. Your Concord filed it as minor, your own people filed it as minor, and you spent this. She gestured, taking in the fleet, the assault, the ended clan. A whole navy. 30 years, that courier said, you built this in secret for 30 years, for 41 soft haulers in the dark. Why? What is the arithmetic? What did 41 lives buy that was worth a navy? Okonkwo looked at her for a long moment. You've misunderstood the arithmetic from the beginning, he said. You think we spent a navy on 41 lives. We didn't. We spent it on the sentence your kind has spoken to my kind for 40 years, and the galaxy has spoken to everyone weaker than itself for 10,000, that some lives are minor, that some losses are the cost of a galaxy too big to care, that a species without a warship worth respecting is a species that is safe to eat. He leaned forward. That sentence has a price now. That's what we bought. Not revenge for 41. A price on that sentence that every predator in this galaxy will see and remember. You are going to carry that price back to the Reaving clans and to the Concord and to anyone who ever again looks at a human loss and reaches for the word minor. The 41 were the spark. You are the message. And the message is very simple. He straightened. There is no such thing as a human life that is safe to take. Susketh was silent for a long time. The galaxy will call you monsters, she said at last. 300 hulls for a raider clan. They will say you are dangerous, unstable, that you overreacted to a minor loss. They can call us whatever they like, Okonkwo said, as long as they never again call one of us minor, take her below. And open a channel to the Concord. I want to make a report. There is a version of this story that ends there at the observation deck, with a young officer looking up at stars that could no longer make her feel small. It is a clean ending, and it is true. But it leaves out the middle, and the middle is where the shape of the thing actually formed. And Marta Vane, decades later, would insist that anyone who wanted to understand what humanity had done in the ungoverned dark had to understand the middle, because the middle was where the discipline was made, and the discipline was the whole point. So it is worth going back. Back to the 6 days at the scarred Red Moon, before the fleet moved, when 300 ships were still folding themselves into one instrument, and a 19-year-old cadet was still learning what her species had built while the galaxy was not watching. Marta had never in her life seen work like it. She had grown up on stories of human courage, the way every human child did, stories of the early colony ships and the long dark crossings and the desperate improvised heroism of a young species clawing its way into a galaxy that had been civilized for 10,000 years before Earth had a written language. Those stories were all about the moment, the crisis, the individual who rose to it. She had come to the fleet expecting to find that, expecting the operations center to be a place of high drama and grand gestures. Instead, she found a place that looked, most of the time, like the least dramatic room in the galaxy. It looked like accounting. It looked like 1,000 people doing small exact tasks, over and over, and checking each other's work, and doing them again. The fuel logistics section spent 3 days on a jump plane deconfliction table that resolved the movement of 311 ships, so that no two hulls occupied the same lane volume in the same window. And when they were done, they did it again, from scratch, with a second team, to see if the two tables matched. They did not match the first time. The discrepancy was 4 seconds in the arrival of a single supply tender. They found it and traced it and fixed it, and Marta watched a section chief treat those 4 seconds as if they were the difference between victory and catastrophe. Because they are, Reyes told her when she asked. Not those 4 seconds specifically, but the habit of caring about 4 seconds. You can't switch that on when it matters. Either your whole fleet cares about 4 seconds all the time in everything, or it doesn't. And if it doesn't, then when the moment comes and 4 seconds actually is the difference, you'll miss it, because you never built the habit. He watched the section chief initial the corrected table. The galaxy thinks we're going to win by being brave. We're going to win by being the kind of people who find a 4-second error in a fuel table at 3 in the morning and fix it before anyone asks. Bravery is cheap, cadet. Everyone's brave in the moment. Discipline is expensive, because you have to pay for it every single day, whether or not anyone's watching. That's the thing the Rakash have never had to buy. That's the thing they won't understand until it's already on top of them. Marta wrote that down. She wrote a great many things down that week. She had come to the fleet as a cadet who refused to accept a lie, and she was becoming, day by day, an officer who understood why the refusal mattered, and how it connected to a fuel table, and a firing solution, and a maneuver drilled 10,000 times, and a word like minor. She watched the crews drill. That was the other thing that struck her, the thing she could not have understood from a tactics textbook. The individual maneuvers the human fleet practiced were not clever. They were, if anything, insultingly simple. Concentrate fire on a point, hold formation, close a gap, replace a fallen element. There was no genius in any single maneuver, nothing a first-year cadet could not have described. The genius, if that was even the word, was that 300 independent crews could execute those simple maneuvers together, perfectly, in the dark, in silence, with their sensors down, 10,000 times without one crew breaking rhythm. The galaxy built genius into its ships. Humanity built reliability into its fleets, and had discovered, somewhere in the last 40 years, that a reliable, simple thing done by 300 crews at once was more dangerous than a brilliant, complex thing done by one. It's the difference between a duelist and a tide, Reyes said. The galaxy fights like duelists. Every fortress is a master swordsman and it fights other master swordsmen, and the whole art is in the individual skill. We don't fight like that. We can't. We're too young, our ships aren't good enough, our crews aren't better than theirs. So we fight like a tide. No single wave is impressive. But the tide does not tire, and it does not miss, and it comes in whether you are ready or not, and it does not stop until it has covered everything. You cannot outduel a tide, cadet. You cannot be more brilliant than water. All you can do is get out of its way, and the broken tide is not going to be able to get out of the way. On the fourth day, Marta made a mistake, and it taught her more than any success could have. She had been refining the Raider network map, and she had grown confident in it, too confident, and she presented an assessment to the operations staff that placed a Rakesh fuel cache in a particular asteroid cluster with, she said, high confidence. A supply strike on that cache, she argued, would cripple the clan's mobility before the assault even began. It was a good idea. It was the kind of clever, aggressive, decisive stroke the stories she had grown up on celebrated. She was proud of it. A logistics officer, a quiet older woman named Chen who had said perhaps 10 words to Marta all week, looked at the assessment for a long moment and then asked one question. What's your confidence actually based on, Ensign? Cadet, Marta corrected automatically. 3 logged incidents originating from that cluster in the last 8 months, plus the transit time analysis, plus. 3 incidents, Chen said, in 8 months. And on those 3 you're recommending we peel a squadron off the main assault to strike a cache you've never actually observed, on the theory that it's there because raids came from near it. She did not say it unkindly. She said it the way you point out a load-bearing crack. What happens to the assault if the cache isn't there, and you've spent a squadron and given away that we're coming? Marta opened her mouth and closed it and looked at her own assessment and saw the crack Chen had seen. 3 incidents was not high confidence. It was a hunch dressed as data. She had wanted it to be true because it was clever, and she had let the wanting bleed into the number. And if the operations staff had trusted her and the cache had not been there, the whole assault would have paid for her overreach. It's not high confidence, Marta said slowly. It's a hypothesis. I overstated it, I'm sorry. Chen nodded, and something in her expression warmed by a fraction of a degree. Don't be sorry, be accurate. That's the whole job, cadet. The Admiral doesn't need you to be bold. He's got 300 hulls, boldness he can supply himself. What he needs from you is a number he can trust and the discipline to tell him when your number is soft. You just did that. Most people your age would have defended the assessment to save face and gotten people killed. You looked at the crack and named it. That's worth more than the clever strike would have been. She slid the assessment back. Redo it with honest confidence bands. And keep the fuel cache idea in your pocket. It might be right, but we don't bet the assault on might. Marta redid it. She spent the rest of that day rebuilding her whole intelligence picture with honest confidence bands, marking every conclusion with how sure she actually was rather than how sure she wished she was. And when she was done, it was less impressive and infinitely more useful. And Convoy, reviewing it, made a small satisfied sound and said, to no one in particular, now this I can plan on. Marta learned in that moment a lesson that would outlast the whole campaign, that the highest form of courage in a disciplined navy was not the willingness to be bold. It was the willingness to be accurate, especially about your own certainty, especially when accuracy cost you the chance to look brilliant. It was, she realized, the same lesson as the 4-second fuel error, and the same lesson as the endlessly drilled simple maneuvers, and the same lesson, underneath everything, as refusing to let 41 lives be called minor. It was all one lesson, worn into the fleet at every level, from the raw telemetry of a dismissed incident to the arrival window of a supply tender. Care about the truth of small things, relentlessly together, and the large things will take care of themselves. The galaxy had never learned that lesson, because the galaxy had never had to. Its power was so vast and so old that it could afford to be careless, to lose ships and colonies and lives and file them all as minor, because there was always more, always a larger reserve, always the comfortable arithmetic of a civilization too big to feel any single wound. Humanity had no such reserve. Humanity was small and young and could not afford to lose anything, and so it had built, out of pure necessity, a navy that refused to lose, that treated every 4 seconds and every soft confidence band and every one of 41 lives as if it mattered, because to a small species everything does. And that, Marta understood by the end of the 4th day, was the thing the galaxy was about to run into and could not have prepared for and would never fully understand. Not a bigger navy. A navy that cared. A navy that had built its entire nature around the proposition that nothing it possessed was minor, and had then aimed that nature, all of it, at the single point of a raider clan that had made the mistake of assuming otherwise. There was a moment, during the assault on the Broken Tine station, that never made it into the official report, and that Marta would tell only rarely, and only to people she trusted to understand it. It happened in the captive decks in the last minutes, and it came to her over the Marine Channel while she stood in the operations center of the Resolute with her hands still pressed to her face. The Marines had breached the 3 security bulkheads all at once, as planned, and flooded into the captive decks faster than the order to kill could be carried out. Most of the guards had been caught between the atrocity they had been ordered to commit and the enemy already through the door, and had chosen the enemy because the enemy had given them no other choice. But not all of them. In one section of the captive decks, a single Rakash guard had reached the prisoners before the Marines reached him, and he had raised his weapon, and there had been, in that section, no Marine close enough to stop him in time. There had been a human captive, though. His name, Marta would learn later, was Toma. He had been taken as a child 31 years before from a colony transport the Concord had filed as a minor loss, and he had grown to adulthood in the lower decks of a raider station, laboring, surviving, a human being the galaxy had thrown away and forgotten and logged. He had no training. He had no weapon. He had spent 31 years learning nothing but how to endure, and endurance, it turned out, was enough. When the guard raised his weapon toward the mass of prisoners, Toma did not run and he did not freeze. He moved into it. He put himself between the weapon and the people behind him, an unarmed man against an armed raider, and he took hold of the weapon with both hands, and he did not let go. He was not stronger than the Rakash. No human was. But he had spent 31 years being the kind of person who does not let go, because letting go in that place had always meant dying, and he held on now with everything he had, long enough, 3 seconds, 4, 5, long enough for a Marine to round the corner and end it. Toma survived. So did every prisoner behind him, and when the Marines reached him and one of them, a young corporal, tried to thank him, Toma, who had not spoken to a free human in 31 years, who had grown up believing the galaxy had decided people like him were minor, said only, in the halting human he barely remembered from childhood, "You came, nobody ever comes. But you came." Marta heard it over the channel, and she took her hands from her face, and she looked at the display where 411 recovered lives were rendered in cold blue light, and she understood, finally and completely, what the whole thing had been for. It had not been for revenge. Convoy had been right about that from the beginning. It had not even been in the end for the message to the galaxy, though the message mattered and would hold for a generation. It had been for the sentence that Toma had spoken, and the fact that it was, for the first time in his life, no longer true. Nobody ever comes. That was the sentence the galaxy had written across 40 years of taken humans and 41 dead haulers and 10,000 years of lives filed as minor. Nobody ever comes. It was the deepest law of the galaxy, deeper than the Concord, deeper than the fortress navies, the quiet certainty that if you were small enough and far enough into the dark, No one would spend anything to answer for you. Humanity had just spent an entire navy to make that sentence false. Not because the arithmetic favored it. The arithmetic never would. It was never going to be efficient to send 300 hulls after a raider clan for the sake of 41 dead and 400 taken. Humanity had done it precisely because it was not efficient, because the whole point was to prove that there existed, in this vast careless galaxy, one species that would answer, that would come, that would spend everything it had rather than let the sentence stand. And the galaxy, which understood efficiency and arithmetic and tolerance, and the vast patient logic of a civilization too big to care, did not have any idea what to do with a species that would do that. That was the real message, not the 300 hulls, not the 90-second envelopment. Those were only the delivery mechanism. The message was Thoma's sentence made false in front of everyone forever, that there was now a place in the galaxy where somebody always comes. The fleet went home the way it had come, all at once, in a single coordinated jump. 311 hulls folding into the lanes in the same 9-second window and vanishing, leaving the rock field empty and the broken Tyne station a hollowed-out shell drifting among the asteroids. Its captives freed, its clan ended, its raid mother in a cell aboard the Resolute composing, whether she wanted to or not, the testimony that would change how 140 species thought about the word miner. Marta rode home in the operations center, and she did not sleep, because she had never been good at sleeping, and because there was work, and because the 411 recovered humans needed processing, and medical care and records and reunification with families most of them had assumed they would never see, and families most of them had been taken from before they were old enough to remember. She threw herself into that work with the same relentless refusal to accept an unresolved thing that had made her good at intelligence, and she was good at this too. And by the time the fleet reached human space, she had personally reconstructed the origins of 30 of the recovered captives from decades-old colony records, matching thrown-away people to the families that had grieved them. And it was, she would say later, the best work she ever did in a uniform, better than the map, better than the junction. Better than any of it. Convoy found her at it on the last night of the voyage home. He watched her work for a while without speaking. Then he said, "You know you don't have to do this yourself. There's a whole reunification section." "I know, sir," Marta said, not looking up from the record she was matching. "But I found them on the map. I found the station and the captives and the junction. It seems wrong to hand them off now before they're actually home. Feels like it would make them minor again, like handing them to a system that files things and forgets them." She finished the match, flagged it for the reunification section, and started the next. "I'd rather see it through, all the way to the family." "That's the whole point, isn't it, sir? Seeing it through, not stopping." Convoy was quiet for a moment. "Yes," he said. "That's the whole point." He watched her start the next record, this 19-year-old who did not sleep and did not tire and did not stop, and who had, in the space of a single campaign, understood the deepest thing about the Navy he had spent 30 years building, better than officers 3 times her age. "You're going to command a fleet someday, Ensign," he said. "I've seen a lot of officers. I know the ones who will. It's not the bold ones. It's the ones who see it through. Who won't hand a thing off before it's finished. Who refuse to let a person become minor, even at the very end, even when the hard part is over and no one would blame them for handing it to a section." He turned to go. "Get some rest before we make orbit." "That's an order, not advice." "I don't sleep well, sir," Marta admitted. Convoy paused at the door. "I know," he said. "Neither do I. It's the ones who see it through that never do." And he left her there in the cold blue light of the operations center, matching thrown-away people to the families that had never stopped grieving them, seeing it through, all the way to the end, because that was the whole point, and because she was human, and because humans, it turned out, were the ones who came. The report Convoy made to the Concord was, in its way, a masterpiece of restraint. He did not boast, he did not threaten. He filed an incident report. in the exact format the Concord used for its own actions, and he classified it himself. And where the classifier had stamped minor across the death of Meridian 9, Okonkwo's report bore a different word, one the human navy had defined for the first time and would now insist the galaxy learn. Incident: destruction of the Broken Tyne Reaving clan. Classification: complete response. Recovered: 411 human nationals held in captivity, some for a period of 40 standard years. Human losses: 19 Marines. Their names follow in full because no human loss is minor. And then, appended, the full unencrypted telemetry of the entire action. 311 hulls moving as one instrument. The envelopment of the hunting party in 90 seconds. The assault on the station. The junction taken in 2 minutes and 50. The captives freed. All of it, raw, undeniable, transmitted openly to every Concord relay, which meant transmitted openly to 140 species who had spent 40 years believing the human defense fleet was strategically negligible. Marta watched the galaxy receive it. She watched it in the reactions that came back over the following days, and she understood that she was watching the world change. The Concord's assessment of the human defense fleet, the one that had rated it regionally competent and strategically negligible, was quietly withdrawn and never republished. The great powers, the fortress navies who had never in 10,000 years imagined a fleet that could concentrate its entire strength on a single point in 6 days, looked at the telemetry and saw, in the human way of war, a thing their own doctrine had no answer for, and they did the thing that great powers do when they see a new kind of danger. They grew very polite. The reaving clans went quiet. Not all at once and not forever, but for a generation the raids on human traffic simply stopped, because the arithmetic that every raid mother carried in her head had a new term in it now, a term named Broken Tyne, and the term said that feeding on humans was not a safe meal in the dark, but a thread that ran back to a navy that would spend all of itself, all at once, on the answer. The predators of the galaxy had built their entire way of life on the belief that some prey was safe. They had learned from one dismissed convoy attack that humanity was not on the menu, and they revised their calculations accordingly, because predators, whatever else they are not stupid about danger. And the smaller species, the ones without fortress navies, the ones the galaxy had always filed as minor when they died, looked at what the humans had done and felt something they had not felt in a very long time. They felt that the word minor was not, perhaps, a law of nature after all. That it was a choice the galaxy had made, and that a choice could be unmade, and that somewhere out in the dark there was now a navy that had unmade it, at least for its own, and had shown that it could be done. Suskith of the Broken Tyne carried her testimony back to the clans, as Okonkwo had intended, and the story she told was not the story she would have chosen. She had wanted to call the humans monsters, unstable, dangerous, a species that spent a navy on a grudge. But the story that survived, the one the galaxy actually absorbed, was simpler and worse for her purposes. It was the story of a raid mother who had read the galaxy correctly her whole life, who had checked every assessment, who had done everything right, and who had made exactly one error. She had believed that a human loss was minor because everyone said so, and the humans had spent an entire navy proving that everyone was wrong, not out of rage, out of discipline, coldly, precisely, completely, and then they had filed a report about it and gone home. That was the part the galaxy found most unsettling of all, not the fury, the lack of it. The relentless, patient, disciplined totality of the human response, executed like an accounting correction, a debt collected in full and then closed. A galaxy that understood rage could not understand a species that would build a secret navy for 30 years and then unleash all of it once without heat to make a single point, and then put it away again. That was not how anyone else fought. That was, the galaxy slowly realized, exactly the thing that made it dangerous. Marta Vane commissioned 3 months later, on schedule at the top of her class. The academy that had once expected her, above all, to be reasonable, gave her the sword and the oath and the rank of ensign, and the same Velthi tactics professor who had called human doctrine quaint and unscalable stood in the assembly and applauded, because the assessment he had taught for a decade had been withdrawn and rewritten, and he was, whatever his prejudices, a man who could read a corrected reality. Convoy was there. He did not make a speech. He was not a man given to drama, but he found her afterward in the crowd of new officers and their families, and he shook her hand, and he said the thing she would carry for the rest of her career. "You found 41 people the galaxy had thrown away," he said, "and you refused to let them be minor. That refusal is the most important weapon this Navy has, ensign, more than the hulls, more than the doctrine. A Navy that can concentrate its whole strength on a single point is a dangerous thing, but a Navy that will do it for 41 strangers in the dark, that is something the galaxy has never seen, and it is the reason they will never again test us." He released her hand. "Don't ever learn to call a thing minor. It's the only lesson that matters. Everything else is just arithmetic." Marta thought about the amber dot on the peripheral incident feed, fading from the display while a classifier stamped minor across 41 lives, and about the courier who had watched a Navy move as one and understood, in a single heartbeat, that the galaxy had changed. She thought about 411 people alive, because a maneuver reached a junction in 2 minutes and 50 seconds. She thought about 19 Marines whose names were now part of every human incident report forever, because no human loss was minor. "I won't, sir," she said. She meant it. She would keep meaning it for 40 years up through the ranks, all the way to a flag officer's star of her own, and in all that time no Raider clan would ever again test human traffic in the ungoverned dark, because the lesson of the broken Tyne held, generation after generation, the way a debt paid in full stays paid. But that was all still ahead of her. That evening, a new ensign in a new uniform, she walked out onto the observation deck of the Academy on Ceres Prime and looked up at the stars, at the 19,000 systems and the 140 species and the vast patient arithmetic that had, for 10,000 years, decided which lives counted and which were merely logged. It was still out there. The galaxy had not become gentle. It had only learned from one dismissed convoy attack that there was a line it should not cross, and where that line was, and what waited on the other side of it. The galaxy had ignored one convoy attack. It had filed 41 lives as minor and moved on, certain that a probationary species with a toy navy would swallow the loss the way it had swallowed every loss for 40 years. And then humanity had answered, not with rage, but with the whole of a navy no one believed it had, disciplined and total and precise, and the galaxy had watched a Raider clan erased, and 400 captives freed and a single word rewritten forever, and it had understood at last what it had been standing next to all along. Marta Vane looked up at the stars that had once ignored her people, and she did not feel small. She never would again.